Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world. More particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, in PG Island, in Mexico, Spain, in Africa, to the United Kingdom, and to our brethren in Australia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad. Greetings, and may the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. This is our episode number 9 on the subject, the day of slaughter. I would like to begin our study reading the Old Symbolic Code. To Symbolic Code number 3 and 4, page 10. To Symbolic Code number 3 and 4, page 10. The Shepherd's Rod does not claim that the number of letters in the above-mentioned names occur in all the languages in the world. I would like to read the question so that we could understand. Beginning in to Symbolic Code 3 and 4, page 9. Drag out, knocked down, but still able to hold its own. Brother B writes the following objections to the Shepherd's Rod, which may not be intended to fight the truth, as did the priests and rabbis in the days of Christ, but to clear himself in the points the enemies of the Shepherd's Rod have attempted to confuse and bring to bear against the message of today. Objection number 1. We'll say that it is a little hard for me to understand Brother Hotep's making his whole claim to inspiration and his whole system of exegesis hung upon infallibility at every point, for he thus makes it possible for the whole structure to be summarily swept away through any one mistake that the human instrument might happen to make. For example, in volume 1, page 333, 334 of the Shepherd's Rod, he gives various examples of the symbolic application of the number of letters in certain names, which he says approves his system of exegesis. Unfortunately, the original Hebrew, the number of letters specified for the vowels do not appear in the Hebrew, being added in the English translation of the names. According to the conditions which he himself laid down, this one mistake invalidates his whole system of exegesis and destroys completely all claims to inspiration. It is not my purpose to hold Brother Hotep to any such rash conditions. Answer. The Shepherd's Rod does not claim that the number of letters in the above mentioned names occur in all the languages in the world, including the Hebrew. But it is correct in that according to the English rule of spelling, the lesson drawn from the symbolical number of letters in the names in question is perfect. And as the Shepherd's Rod claims not that these names are composed by the same number of letters that are found in the spelling rules of all the languages in the world, it still stands on its own legs now on this question, as it has stood against all the buffs and rebuffs brought to bear against it in the past 5 years. Moreover, even though Brother B's claim be correct, that God had nothing to do with the lesson derived from the number of letters which the names contain, his claim does not remove the fact that in as far as the English language is concerned, with which only the Shepherd's Rod is dealing, is correct and free from reproach, although the numerical perfection may have come about only by a chance. However, I would rather give God the credit, for as long as I employ every means to emphasize the truth and to exalt the word, I am sure in the day of judgment, my deeds would be justified, rather than the deeds of him who may by lackness attribute the work of God to a chance. Nevertheless, the Bible sustained the claims of the Shepherd's Rod in that there is nothing hid from God, and that all things are naked and open unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. Hebrew chapter 1 verse 13. Hence, as even the very hairs of our heads are numbered. Matthew 10 verse 30. I am sure that God knew the spelling rules of the English tongue before the English-speaking people did. And as he also knew that he would use the English instead of the Hebrew tongue, by which to reveal the truth that the Shepherd's Rod contains, he instructed the prophet Isaiah to thus write, with stammering lips in another tongue will he speak to this people. Isaiah 28 verse 11. If the numerical symbolism of the letters was in the Hebrew spelling rule instead of in the English, it would have been hard to discover it, and would not have been as great a wonder, namely, not showing God's foreknowledge of the language he was to use in fulfillment of Isaiah 28 verse 11 at the unrolling of the scroll. So, here in 2 Symbolic Code 3 and 4, pages 9 and page 10, I would like to emphasize the statement that God being an all-knowing God, it is very certain that God knoweth everything, even before its existence. And here in 6 BC, 1082, it says, the eternal purposes of God. God had a knowledge of the events of the future, even before the creation of the world. He did not make his purposes to fit circumstances, but he allowed matters to develop and work out. So the eternal purpose of God, no, it was not made by God to fit circumstances, but the all-powerful God, he allowed all the circumstances to develop and to work out, brothers and sisters, that instead of hindering God's purpose, it is only helping and aiding the eternal purpose of God. It says he did not work to bring about a certain condition of things, but he knew that such a condition would exist. So it is not God who worked out to bring about such certain condition, but God knoweth beforehand that such condition would exist. The plan that should be carried out upon the defection of any of the high intelligences of heaven. This is the secret, the mystery which has been hid from ages, and an offering was prepared in the eternal purposes to do the very work which God has done for fallen humanity. 6 BC, 1082. And those readings, brothers and sisters, is even more in reality on our subject concerning the 40 typical days. Because in this study, God revealed the 40 typical days from Bible calendar to the Roman calendar. It is not God who bring about that Roman calendar, but God knoweth beforehand, even before its existence. And through the miraculous power of God, God devised ways and means that the purpose of the wicked man will even be thwarted, according to volume 5, 754. He can devise ways and means to thwart the purposes of wicked men. It was predicted beforehand in Daniel chapter 7 that the little horned head will change the laws and the times. In Daniel 7, verse 25. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time, and times and the dividing of time. Daniel 7 verse 25. So even before the existence of the Roman Empire in the days of Daniel, by which at that time it is the kingdom of Babylon that was reigning, but it was already protected beforehand, the existence of the fourth kingdom, which is the Roman Empire. And they are the one who changed the times. And it is even more particularly pointing to the Bible creation calendar. And if you will look at with the determined effort of the enemy of inspiration, it seems very complicated. But with such complication, brothers and sisters, God been able to build the wondrous structure of the plan of redemption. I would like to read this reading in Education, page 178. It says, as the will-like complications were under the guidance of the hand beneath the wings of the cherubim, so the complicated play of human events is under divine control. So the complicated play of human events, it is under divine control. Amidst the strife and tumult of nations, he that sitteth above the cherubim still guides the affairs of the earth. The history of nations that one after another had occupied their allotted time and place, unconsciously witnessing to the truth of which they themselves knew not the meaning, but it speaks to us. To every nation and to every individual of today, God has assigned a place in His great plan. Today, men and nations are being measured by the plummet in the hand of Him who makes no mistake. All are by their own choice deciding their destiny, and God is overruling all for the accomplishment of His purposes. The history which the great I Am has marked out in His Word, uniting link after link in the prophetic chain from eternity in the past to eternity in the future, tells us where we are today in the procession of the ages and what may be expected in the time to come. All that prophecy has foretold as coming to pass until the present time has been traced on the pages of history. And we may be assured that all which is yet to come will be fulfilled in its order. Education, page 178. And I would like to re-emphasize again that according to the voice of inspiration, brethren, we will not be focusing only to the chronology of the history, but as well as the chronology of the prophecy, by which in reality is even more important to observe. So it says you I would like to read again the statement saying, who can read this prophecy of the 70 weeks? Who can read this prophecy of the 70 weeks and the history of Israel, Nehemiah, the Jews, Romans, John, and Jesus Christ, and not be convicted of its exact fulfillment in 490 years? And I would ask, how can it be possible that men who believe the Bible and who have seen the exact fulfillment of all prophetic chronology thus far can say with any degree of propriety, these 70 weeks are indefinite? Where are their proofs? Not on the records of divine inspiration. For here we find no sample. Here is no time given that has not been literally fulfilled according to the true intent and meaning of the prophecy. Why not then settle this one point forever among believers in the divine authority of the Scriptures, that the chronology of prophecy is to be received with an equal faith with the chronology of history? Why not believe the declarations of God concerning the future as we do concerning the past? Who denies that God created the heavens and the earth and all that were in them in 6 days? None but the infidel, say you. What better then is he who denies that God will accomplish what he has said he would perform in a given period? Well, may the infidel charge home upon us hypocrisy when we refuse to believe the latter as well as the former. All these cases which I have brought forward as proof of prophetic chronology were once prophecies. And would it have been right in Noah, the patriarchs and prophets, to have rejected the time given any more than the manner? I answer, it could not have been faith to have rejected either. Then let us have faith to believe the chronology of the future as well as of the past. So, according to our reading, brothers and sisters, that is very plain that whatever the Word of God has said, it says that whatever the things that we expect to come, according to Education 178, it will be fulfilled in its proper order. Now, let us go back again, brethren. Our reading in track number 3, page 86. The 40 days in Acts chapter 1, verse 3 and 9, from the resurrection to the ascension, are consequently typical of the period from 1844 to the fulfillment of the marking and slaying as recorded in Ezekiel chapter 9, in Revelation 7, verse 3 to 8, Revelation 14, verse 1 to 5, respectively, and in Testimonies to Ministers, page 445, Testimonies for the Church, volume 3, page 266, and also earlier writings, pages 270 to 273. Now, to repeat again, brothers and sisters, of all the subject recorded in the shepherd's rod, this subject concerning the 40 days were untouched by many shepherd's rod believers. But the absolute fact is that of all the subject recorded in the shepherd's rod, the subject of the 40 days is synonymous to the words of Jesus Christ in Matthew 24 verse 15, saying, those who read it, let him understand. Now, here in track number 3, third edition, it says, it was during the 40 days of Christ's personal presence with his disciples, from his resurrection to his ascension, that the first fruits, the 120, were gathered in. His presence among them has a deep meaning, and it should be understood by every disciple of Christ. So there is an absolute necessity that this subject should be understood by every disciple of Jesus Christ. But how could we be able to understand unless God will bestow unto us the gift of understanding? Remember, according to 2TG, number, let me read to you. It says here, and 2TG, that unless God will bestow unto us the gift of understanding, then, of course, there is no possibility that we could understand the prophecy. It says here in 2TG 44, pages 31 and page 32, no one say the scriptures can privately, without inspiration, unfold the prophecies. For reasons the apostle, as prophecy came not by private effort, not by the will of men, but by holy men, and the Spirit neither can it therefore be of private interpretation, but only by holy men, led by the Holy Spirit. Moreover, even after prophecy is thus interpreted, only to the righteous, the penitent, is given the gift of understanding it. Daniel 12, verse 10. So, such understanding is a special gift bestowed by God only to the penitent ones, or to the humble and teachable. The same with the verse in the Bible in Psalms 25. It says here on verse 9, the meek will he guide in judgment, and the meek will he teach his way. Psalms 25, verse 9. In 1TG number 41, it says, pages 24 and page 25, moreover, he was anointed to preach to the meek, to those who are not self-sufficient, not high-minded, but humble and teachable. The other class could not be taught. So, only to the meek, the humble, and those who have a teachable spirit. In 1 TG 45, page 13, it says, hence, 1 TG 45:13. Hence the servants who are to build him a house and to make a place for his rest are to be men of a poor and contrite spirit, men who tremble at his word, men who are not proud and boastful, but who are teachable and mindful of his word, men who are penitent and see themselves in need of everything instead of in need of nothing. 1 TG 45, page 13. And the only thing that I could say is that it says in 1 TG 37, page 11, those who are fortunate enough to have this revelation brought to them, I am talking about the wonderful subject, the 40 days. The 40 typical days, it says, those who are fortunate enough to have this revelation brought to them are the people. They are the particular object in view. Because according to One SR Pocket Edition on page 58, it says, but now at the appointed time, He Himself, God Himself, reveals their significance to the very people for whom they were originally and especially designed. And to those who are fortunate enough to have this revelation brought to them, of course, they are the people. For there is no other safe conclusion if God causes the prophecies to be written, sealed, and then unsealed at His will and at the time appointed. 1 TG 37, page 11. And since, according to the voice of inspiration, these biblical numbers are given by God to serve as our signpost to the holy city. And if these typical 40 days are now completely revealed and unfolded unto us, without any doubts, the fulfillment of such prophecy, brothers and sisters, will be fulfilled very soon. It says here, the subject to some may seem as strange as the thought of the earth revolving on its axis was to the inhabitants of another day. Nevertheless, incredible things often become plain facts. Hence, though we little know of the many biblical numbers and their secret code of truth at the present time, They are not always to be dark elements to God's people. For they must be there to discover and illuminate to our vision the signposts on our way to the holy city. And the reading in tract number 3, page 86, without any doubt, brothers and sisters, such typical 40 days, the focal point is the cleansing of the sanctuary, the marking, the sealing of the 144,000, as well as the slaying. Because it was definitely stated in the statement in tract number 3, page 86. And it is impalpable in inconsistency that such subject will be revealed, such subject will be understood, such subject will be unfolded after the events. Then for what for? Such revelation. The character of God according to the voice of inspiration, first in tract number 1, page 12, it says, never has this symbolical prophecy been understood by any people. Now let us apply this statement to the symbolical 40 days. Never has this symbolical prophecy been understood by any people, and never could it have been fulfilled and not been revealed. Never that such prophecy will be fulfilled without revealing first the fulfillment of such predicted event. According to the voice of inspiration, then for what purpose that they were written? If such prophecy will be fulfilled, and nobody knows, nobody understands, then for what purpose that they had been written? It says here in answerer number 2, page 75, these prophecies must therefore be revealed. Now, I would like to apply this statement to the 40 symbolical days. This prophecy must therefore be revealed in order to strengthen the church in her final warfare. Otherwise, for what purpose were they written? And since the only purpose, according to the reading in 1934 tract 3, concerning the biblical numbers, by which among the biblical numbers, these 40 days from Christ's resurrection to His ascension are typical, and it was written, recorded, and given unto us as a signpost on our way to the kingdom. To strengthen our spiritual journey, to prepare our lives. Brothers and sisters, the same with the statement here in, let's read, given in, I think it is the third edition. It's called the third edition of the tract number 3. Although there is similarity, the statement, but here the voice of inspiration, instead of using holy city, the voice of inspiration used the statement, our roadmap to the kingdom, according to the voice of inspiration. Let me read to you. As our a guide while we are traveling and waiting for God's kingdom. It says here, the same statement. Now, I lost the page. Now, I would like to read this statement, and the third edition, page 99. Thus thrillingly unfolded in number, the absolute mode of truth is the equation of salvation. The absolute mode of truth is the equation of salvation, out of which, just briefly to recapitulate, emerges the number of Christ as representative of the Godhead on earth, which is number 3. The number of the gathering time, 40. You see, the number of the gathering time, 40. The number of the saints in the apostolic Pentecost, 120. The combined number of the saints in the Noatic and the apostolic Pentecost, 240. The number of the Bible, 5. The number of the recipients of the final Pentecost, 144,000. The number of the entire period of human provision, 6,000. And finally, the number of the overall time of sin and redemption, 7,000. What priceless gift divine! And oh, may this realization stir the heart of every earnest reader, as it did the heart of David, to give praise and thanksgiving to God for His inexpressible love to man. O Lord, sings the prophet, Thou art my God. I will exalt Thee. I will praise Thy name, for Thou hast done wonderful things. Thy counsels of old are faithfulness and truth. So, what a wonderful statement, brothers and sisters. And the same with the statement in 2SR 253, it says, it is certain that nothing could fit so perfectly by accident. But think of such marvelous foresight in devising a wonder of this kind, which could reveal by a living picture the future for thousands of years. Are not such evidences as this a token of love divine toward fallen beings? Gratitude swells from our hearts. Words fail us. We can only exclaim with the psalmist, Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path. I have sworn, and I will perform it, that I will keep thy righteous judgments. Psalms 119, 105, and 106. To us our page 253. And again, brethren, as a warning given by the shepherd's rod here in 1SR 233 and 234, saying, Woe to him who may think all these wonderful designs in the beauty of perfection are just a chance or an accident. Such a one is denying the master mechanic of all creation. He is paying homage to evolution, meaning chance. 1SR page 234, 233 and 234. Now, of the many subjects recorded in the writings of Sister White. I think the only portion by which the shepherd's rod humbly confessed that the prophet had not been able to clear the confusion is concerning the presentation of the wave ship in the presence of the Lord on the second day of the feast. I would like to read first the statement again for the benefits to all who are listening. In 3 Symbolic Code 8 to 10, page 11. Now, the only disagreement between the shepherd's rod and the Desire of Ages on this subject is that the Desire of Ages says that on the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord. The Desire of Ages, page 77, which places the first feast of the Passover on the Sabbath. Or in other words, the shepherd's rod says that if the first fruit of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord on the second day of the feast, then it must be that April 15 fall on Sabbath. Because the first feast always fall on April 15. But April 15 does not always fall on the same day. But if the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord on the second day of the feast, then absolutely the first feast, according to the shepherd's rod, should fall on the Sabbath. Because the Bible very plain that the first fruit of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, must be presented before the Lord tomorrow after the Sabbath. And that is the special day of the week, which we commonly call Sunday, according to the shepherd's rod. Now let us read tract number 3 on page 78. It says here, the wave sheep was to be offered on the morrow after the Sabbath. That is on the first day of the week, now commonly called Sunday. This offering was to be presented not on a special day of the month, but rather on a special day of the week. And there is no other day. Brothers and sisters, according to the voice of inspiration. Now let's read here in 13 Symbolic Code, the statement given by the voice of inspiration, saying that no, there is no other day by which God commanded that the wave sheep must be offered. It must be on the first day of the week, which we commonly called as Sunday. So let's read here and let me see if I could find that statement. In 13 Symbolic Code, it says that there is no other day by which the voice of inspiration, or God Himself, commanded that the wave sheep must be offered. It must be on the first day of the week, as stated in Leviticus chapter 23, I think verse 3 and verse 11. Let me see if I could find that statement. given by the Shepherd's Rod. Um, 13 Symbolic Code 5 and 6, page 23. It says, take next the wave ship, which is typical of the resurrection of Christ, having to be offered during the Passover week, and no other day but on the morrow after the Sabbath, Leviticus 23:11, on the first day of the week. It too points out that the day on which the Lord was to rise from the dead was to be on the first day of the week, the day after the seventh-day Sabbath. 13 Symbolic Code 5 and 6, page 23. But according to the Shepherd's Rod, the only portion in the writings of Sister White, but it seems there was a disagreement between the Shepherd's Rod, is the statement in Desire of Ages 77 as well as in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 539. In 1 Symbolic Code number 6, page 7, it says, page 6 of this issue, in answering a question in regards to the length of time from the day Jesus ate the Passover to the crucifixion, proves that he ate the Passover feast with the 12 on Wednesday night, and that he was resurrected on Sunday morning. That is on the day the sheep was to be presented before the Lord. This proves that the words on the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, were presented before God, Patriarchs and Prophets, 539, could not mean the day after Jesus ate the Passover. However, thus far, we are not able to give a better explanation of Patriarchs and Prophets 539. Why is it that the prophet had not been able to give a better explanation concerning Patriarchs and Prophets 539 as well as Desire of Ages, page 77? The only answer that we could give is because it was not present truth in their time. 1 SR, page 13. The answer we give is because it was not present truth in their time. But brothers and sisters, we need to stand with that admonition given by the voice of inspiration in Selected Messages, Book 1, page 57, saying, regarding the testimonies, nothing is to be cast aside or to be ignored. 1 SM, page 57. Regarding the testimonies, nothing is ignored, nothing is cast aside, but time and place must be considered. That is very plain, brothers and sisters. Time and place must be considered. Now, the only time by which such subject will be considered, that is the time when God unfolds such scripture. Because present truth comes only from God. 11 Symbolic Code number 3, page 5. Man himself does not know the seasons, brothers and sisters. And it says here in 11 Symbolic Code number 3, page 5, present truth comes only from God. Man does not know the seasons, and therefore God himself must appoint the time for present truth to be revealed. And since it is guaranteed by inspiration that even the devil either cannot unfold, brothers and sisters, the hidden truths of the Bible, according to 2TG 24, on page 16. So let us read the statement here. It says, 2TG 24 on page 16. And at the time that it is unfolded, then all are to humbly admit that God Himself is at work. It says here, are not these tests strong enough to convince anyone that the secret things of God, such as the canceled prophecies, regardless how simple, are not disclosed by finite men? No, not by the devil either. When God wants a thing to be a secret, though it be plain and simple, it remains concealed until He Himself reveals it. Then when it is revealed, all are to know that God Himself is at work. Thus all are to recognize the seasons and the times of the gospel work. Are not therefore the wise men of the day making fools of themselves by airing their private interpretations of the unrevealed passages of the Scriptures? 2TG 24, page 16. The voice of inspiration says, brethren, that to open without a key, a locked door is of course to break the door. Track number 12, page 63. To open without a key, a locked door is of course to break the door. But being unbreakable, the locked door of prophecy is impossible to open without the key. And since this locked door of prophecy concerning the 40 typical days is now completely open, all are to humbly admit that the key was bestowed by God, graciously placed in our hands. That is the only admissible conclusion, my dear brothers and sisters. Because the Shabbos rod plainly told us, it says here in 1 Symbolic Code number 3, page 4, 1 Symbolic Code number 3, page 4, when God reveals something to a man which he for himself cannot find, the Bible term for such revelation is inspiration. When God reveals something to a man which he for himself cannot find, the Bible term for such revelation is inspiration. And this revelation, brothers and sisters, if a finite understanding could be able to comprehend it, it was already explained many years ago. But the very fact that nobody touched such 40 typical days is the strongest proof, concretely builds the impregnable facts that such prophecy can never be understood without the Spirit of Jesus Christ, the Spirit of truth, by which to Him alone has the absolute authority to interpret the Scriptures. It says here in track number 3, page 91, for all there exists in this connection one great need, the Spirit of truth. That is the Spirit of Jesus Christ. Because Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. John 14, verse 6. For all there exists in this connection one great need, the Spirit of truth, whose right alone it is to interpret the Scriptures. Brothers and sisters, the only authoritative, or the only one who have an absolute authority to interpret the Scriptures, it must be the Spirit of truth, which is the Spirit of Christ. And that Spirit, brothers and sisters, will connect Himself through the human channel. Now, let us go back again to our reading. To repeat again, brothers and sisters, the statement given by the shepherd's rod. Brethren, I would like to show to you that the only pattern by which April 15 falls on Sabbath is pattern number 2, by which it is on the second day of the feast, by which the wave shape is offered or presented before the Lord. And the shepherd's rod had not been able to give a concrete explanation why the prophet Sister White implicitly declared that the wave shape is presented before the Lord on the second day of the feast, by which such event cannot be applied to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Because Jesus Christ was resurrected in the 4th day of the feast, according to the shepherd's rod. Not only according to the shepherd's rod, but according to the Bible itself, as is stated in 3 Symbolic Code, number 8 to 10, page 11. Now, the statement in Desire of Ages, there must be an occurrence, the specific event mentioned in that reading, which cannot be applied to the event of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, brothers and sisters. Now let us read the Desire of Ages itself on page 77. Desire of Ages, page 77. So let us read a statement given by the Spirit of Prophecy. It says here, the Passover was followed by the 7 days Feast of Unleavened Bread. On the 2nd day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord. All the ceremonies of the feast were types of the work of Christ. The deliverance of Israel from Egypt was an object lesson of redemption, which the Passover was intended to keep in memory. The slain lamb, the unleavened bread, the sheaf of first fruits, represented the Savior. Now, this is the statement by which the Spirit of Prophecy says, on the 2nd day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord. Now, what event that had been mentioned here? That on the 2nd day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord. First of all, whatever the event, the specific event mentioned in this reading, since the sheaf of barley was presented before the Lord on the 2nd day of the feast, then the first feast, which is April 15, must fall on Sabbath, according to the Shepherd's Rod in 3 Symbolic Code 8 to 10, page 11. So we need to trace the history. Brothers and sisters, what historical event, my dear brothers and sisters, by which it was on the 2nd day of the feast that the first fruits of the year's harvest is presented before the Lord? Now let us trace up the Exodus movement. We know that the Exodus movement is divided into 2 sections. The first section is led by Moses, and the second section is led by Joshua. Now let us focus first to the first section. First of all, according to 1SR, page 114 and 115, it says, the prophecy made to Abraham of 430 years ended at the time the children of Israel went out of Egypt, which is according to Bible chronology, King James Version, 1491 BC. So, the Shepherd's Rod made it so plain. The year by which the Passover took place in Egypt. And at midnight, there was a slaughtering. And then, on the 15th, that is the beginning of their departure from Egypt. And that was on the year 1491 BC. And the Shepherd's Rod says, according to King James Version. And in 2SR 118, it says that the King James Version is dependable, as well as the statement, 3 Symbolic Code, number 7, page 4. Now, historically, if you will look at, brothers and sisters, in 1491 BC, in Bible pattern calendar, that is pattern number 4. And in pattern number 4, let us look at pattern number 4 in Bible calendar. Pattern number 4, the wave sheep is presented before the Lord on the 3rd day of the feast, which is April 17, by which April 15 fall on Friday. So this is pattern number 4, by which April 1 fall on Friday and April 15 fall on Friday. Therefore, the wave sheep is presented before the Lord on the 3rd day of the feast. Therefore, historically, the statement in Desire of Ages, page 77, cannot be applied to the Passover while they were still in Egypt. Because on that Passover week, the wave sheep is presented before the Lord on the 3rd day of the feast. And of course, that is pattern number 4. The next year must be pattern number 5. And the next year must be pattern number 6. Now, historically, only twice in the first section of the Exodus, under the leadership of Moses, that they had been able to observe the Passover feast. Only within 2 years. As according to the Bible and to the spirit of prophecy. Now let us read again, Patriarchs and Prophets. Patriarchs and Prophets. So let us read the statement given by the voice of inspiration. 406, in the wilderness. Patriarchs and Prophets, page 406. For nearly 40 years, the children of Israel are lost to view in the obscurity of the desert. The space, says Moses, in which we came from Kadesh Barnea until we were come over the brook Sird, was 38 years. Until all the generation of the men of war were wasted out from among the hosts, as the Lord sware unto them. For indeed the hand of the Lord was against them, to destroy them from among the hosts, until they were consumed. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 14 and 15. During these years, the people were constantly reminded that they were under the divine rebuke. In the rebellion at Kadesh, they had rejected God, and God had for the time rejected them. Since they had proved unfaithful to His covenant, they were not to receive the sign of the covenant, the rite of circumcision. Their desire to return to the land of slavery had shown them to be unworthy of freedom, and the ordinance of the Passover, instituted to commemorate the deliverance from bondage, was not to be observed. So after that event, the rebellion at Kadesh, after 2 years in the wilderness, they were no longer allowed to observe the ordinance of the Passover according to the Bible, as well as to the spirit prophecy. So as far as history is thus concerned, there are only 3 Passovers by which Moses had been able to observe together with ancient Israel, first while in Egypt, and the 2 is while in the wilderness. And that is in Egypt, pattern number 4, in the wilderness, pattern number 5, and pattern number 6. The last Passover by which Moses observed together with the ancient Israel is the same pattern on the day of crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The same pattern. Pattern number 6. Now let us look at pattern number 5. Brothers and sisters, to repeat again, it is very important to familiarize the 7 patterns of the Bible calendar. Otherwise, we would find difficulty to understand the lesson portrayed in this very important subject, the 40 typical days. Now, pattern number 5, brothers and sisters, the wave sheep is offered on the 7th day of the feast. The first day is on Monday, 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. April 21, 7th day of the feast. Pattern number 6. On pattern number 6, the wave sheep is offered on the 4th day of the feast, April 18. The first day is 15. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the last observance of Moses concerning the Passover in the wilderness together with the ancient Israel. And after that celebration, after that observance, because of the rebellion in Kadesh, they were no longer allowed to observe the ordinance of the Passover. So under the first section of the Exodus, there was no such incident that they observed the Passover by which the wave sheep is presented before the Lord on the 2nd day of the feast. The first observance in Egypt, that is on the 3rd day of the feast. The first observance in the wilderness, that is on the 7th day of the feast. The last observance in the wilderness under the leadership of Moses, that is on the 4th day of the feast. Typifying the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But we are looking to that statement, brothers and sisters, to that statement by which, according to the voice of inspiration, the wave sheep is presented before the Lord on the 2nd day of the feast. Now let us read Patriarchs and Prophets 485. A short distance from Jordan, the Hebrews made their first encampment in Canaan. Heard Joshua circumcised the children of Israel, and the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and kept the Passover. In 613, in Patriarchs and Prophets, it says, Gilgal had been the place of Israel's first encampment in the Promised Land. It was here that Joshua, by divine direction, set up the pillar of 12 stones to commemorate the miraculous passage of the Jordan. Here circumcision had been renewed. Here they had kept the first Passover after the sin at Kadesh and the desert sojourn. That is very plain here in Patriarchs and Prophets 613. What year is that? Now, let us just easily subtract 1491 BC minus 40, and it will fall in 1451 BC. Now, let us look at now the pattern in 1451 BC. Let us look at the chart, the timetable. You see, brothers and sisters, 1451 BC, that is pattern number 2. Exactly fits to the statement in Desire of Ages, page 77, and Patriarchs and Prophets, 539. That event is pointing to the very first Passover that had been held under the leadership of Joshua, brothers and sisters. That is after Moses died. And that is the time by which, according to the voice of inspiration, they were in the borders in the Promised Land. Now, here in the book of Joshua, let's read the statement. It says here, Joshua chapter, I think chapter 5. Let us read the statement given by the voice of inspiration, brothers and sisters. In Joshua chapter 5, on verse 4, 5, and 6, it says, Now all the people that came out were circumcised, but all the people that were born in the wilderness by the way as they came forth out of Egypt, them they had not circumcised. For the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness, till all the people that were men of war which came out of Egypt were consumed, because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord, unto whom the Lord sware that he would not shew them the land which the Lord sware unto their fathers, that he would give us a land that floweth with milk and honey. Verse 7, And their children whom he raised up in their stead, them Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised, because they had not circumcised them by the way. Verse 9, And the Lord said unto Joshua, This day have I ruled away the reproach of Egypt from of you, wherefore the name of the place is called Gilgal unto this day. And the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal, and keep the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even in the plains of Jericho. And they did eat of the old corn of the land, and on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the same self day. Now, I would like to read to you, brethren, this statement in 1888 message. It says, one other text, if anyone were needed to settle the fact that Israel did not get out of Egypt as long as they were in the wilderness. One other text, if anyone were needed to settle the fact that Israel did not get out of Egypt as long as they were in the wilderness, is found in the book of Joshua. You remember the passage after they had crossed Jordan, then they were circumcised. It is written, this day have I ruled away the reproach of Egypt from of you. Those people you see who left Egypt never got out of Egypt till they had crossed Jordan. For not until then was the reproach of Egypt taken away. Then they were all converted men. That whole nation crossed Jordan by faith. It was a nation that believed God. And there was not a dissenting voice, nor a doubting thought. Then they were out of Egypt. Thus you see that it is perfectly evident that spiritual Egypt is the literal Egypt of the Bible. Now, that statement in 2 SR 275, it says, you will also note on page 222 that the 430 prophetic years originally applied to Abraham and his seed overlap the 430 of Ezekiel chapter 4. The 430 years of Ezekiel should terminate in 1929 or 1930, but the perfect fulfillment of the prophetic period of Abraham in its antitype is yet in the future, going out of Egypt. What kind of fulfillment? Perfect fulfillment. It cannot be applied, brothers and sisters, to the historical event under the leadership of Moses, brothers and sisters, because according to the Bible, according to the spirit of prophecy, although they were already in the wilderness, but they had not been able to get out of Egypt. And that is why here in 1 TG, number 7, let me read to you the statement. In 1 TG number 7, it says here, on page 10 and page 11, in order to salvage the youth, or to rescue the young people, in order to salvage the youth, God had to bury all their murmuring parents except the 2 faithful, trusting men who protested against the evil report of the other 10 spies. Brothers and sisters, what is the evil report? In the antitype in our days, I think it must be applied to all of them who will oppose this message. It says, mark you, every adult that left Egypt, except Caleb and Joshua, had to be buried before the youth could cross the Jordan. Why? Because though God did take them with ease out of Egypt, He could not get Egypt out of them. Or in other words, God had been able to easily get them out of Egypt physically, but they could not take Egypt in their lives, spiritually and literally, because the spiritual Egypt is the literal Egypt, or the literal Egypt is the spiritual Egypt. And that is the very message, brothers and sisters. According to the voice of inspiration, before God smite all the firstborn, God commanded to completely separate all our children in the Egyptian dwellings. It says here, I would like to read to you the statement. Spiritual Egypt is indeed the literal Egypt, because spiritual things are the most literal of all things. There is, as there always has been, a physical Egypt over there in northern Africa, through which the river Nile flows. But that is not literal Egypt. That is physical Egypt. The literal Egypt is the spiritual Egypt. Brothers and sisters. So what is the literal Egypt? Which is the spiritual Egypt? The place by which Jesus Christ was crucified, according to Revelation 11. For example, I would like to read this reading. It says, I need not cite you to another instance. This is enough to call your attention to the fact that Israel were not completely out of Egypt when they stood on the shore of the Red Sea and sang the song of Moses. Bodily, they were out of Egypt physically, but spiritually, they were not. They were delivered from Egyptian bondage of the body, or physically, but they were bound by Egyptian spiritual bondage. And the trouble is they never did get out of Egyptian bondage. They died in Egyptian bondage. It says, when the Lord spoke His law from Sinai, Moses said to them that it was that they should sin not. Now read again, Hebrews 11 verse 25. Choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. But we saw in our other lesson that the pleasures of sin they referred to were but the pleasures of Egypt. The world. Brothers and sisters. And that's why I remember the statement in early writings. It says here, in 266 and 267 in early writings, present the world before them in the most attractive light, that they may love and idolize it. So this is the absolute command of the devil to all the fallen angels. It says, present the world before them in the most attractive light, that they may love and idolize it. Early writings, page 266. So it says, let us go back to our reading. Moses being heir to the throne of Egypt, all the wealth of Egypt, all the glory of Egypt, and all the power of Egypt were ready to fall into his hands, as he needed simply to step upon the throne and enjoy it. These were the pleasures of Egypt. brothers and sisters, to be someone. And the pleasures in Egypt, I would like to define in one word: worldly ambition. The voice of inspiration says, the seal of the living God can never be placed on any man. Volume 5, page 216. Now is the time to prepare. The seal of God will never be placed upon the forehead of an impure man or woman. It will never be placed upon the forehead of the ambitious, world-loving man or woman. It will never be placed upon the forehead of men or women of false tongues and or deceitful hearts. All who receive the seal must be without spot before God, candidates for heaven. In the upper part, it says, what are you doing, brethren, in the great work of preparation? Those who are uniting with the world are receiving the worldly mold and preparing for the mark of the beast. Those who are distrustful of self, who are humbling themselves before God and purifying their souls by obeying the truth, they are receiving the heavenly mold and preparing for the seal of God in their foreheads. When the decree goes forth, the stamp is impressed, their character will remain pure and spotless for eternity. Volume 5, page 216. It says, brothers and sisters, these were the pleasures of Egypt. But the record says they were the pleasures of sin. Then what is spiritual bondage of Egypt? And what is spiritual Egypt? The bondage of sin. Brethren, we are now homeward bound to the kingdom. That predicted event, brothers and sisters, ponder deeply. When was God's people anciently that they have been completely been out of Egypt? That was the very first Passover under the leadership of Joshua, by which it was on the second day of the feast that the sheaf of barley was presented before the Lord when they were in the borders of the promised land. That is our time, brothers and sisters. And look at, brethren, how God perfectly arranged the history from the past and the history of the future. It was pattern number 4, 1491 BC. This is pattern number 4. The day of slaughter, the midnight slaughtering. 1451 BC, it is pattern number 2. That is the time when they completely get out of Egypt. But such event, brothers and sisters, in the antitype is in reverse order. It must be in reverse order. Because God's people will observe the Passover in this protected event, by which 2 days or 1451 BC, pattern number 2, the antitype must be on this very year, 2022, pattern number 2, Bible calendar, by which in Gregorian that is 2020, then 1491 BC, pattern number 4, by which in the antitype that is 2024 AD, by which in Gregorian that is 2022. Just 2 years in the antitype. 2 years from that date, God's people would be on the kingdom era, which exactly fits to the statement 2 days from the future, the presidential election of the United States of America. Now let us read, brothers and sisters, the statement given by the voice of inspiration that predicted 2 years. Brothers and sisters, we know that that is prophetic. And so I would like to read to you this statement in 1 TG number 11. 2 TG number 11, pages 7 and page 8. Zechariah chapter 1 verse 12. Then the angel of the Lord answered and said, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou not have mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which thou hast had indignation these 70 years? So that is 70 years. Zechariah 1 verse 12. And this is the commentary given by the Shepherd's Rod. 1 TG number 11, page 7 and page 8. The prophet Jeremiah's prediction that the Jews were to spend 70 years in Babylonian captivity had ended, although they were still in Babylon. Now let us now look up the historical event. From the time the commencement of the reign of the Babylonian Empire, 608 BC. So let us subtract 608 minus 70 equals 538. 538 BC. The 70 years captivity already ended in 538 BC. But they were still in Babylon. Not until in 536 BC that they returned to Jerusalem. 2 years from the time when the 70 years captivity ended. Now let us read again the statement here in 1TG. 1TG number 11, page 7 and 8. The prophet Jeremiah's prediction that the Jews were to spend 70 years in Babylonian captivity had ended, although they were still in Babylon. But since this symbolical prophecy finds its fulfillment in our day, what symbolical prophecy? The 70 years in the book of Zechariah, chapter 1, verse 12. So it says, but this symbolical prophecy finds its fulfillment in our day instead of in Zechariah's day. The angels plead for mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, therefore, finds its direct application in this day. There is, however, this parallel. The time of the Babylonian captivity overlaps some years the time of returning to Jerusalem. In like manner, John's prediction that the church should return to the vineyard after having spent 1,260 years in the wilderness in the land of the Gentiles, Revelation 12 verse 6, had ended and even overlapped since the year 1798, and there was no sign as yet for her returning. I know it is a deep prophecy, but the word parallel meaning the same, the illustration must be absolutely the same. Now, then it says, and as the denomination was in no condition to accept additional truth, the results that the church is still in the wilderness, concerning which inspiration said, if the people of God had gone to work as they should have gone to work right after the Minneapolis meeting in 1888, the world could have been won in 2 years and the Lord would have come. General Conference Bulletin, page 1892. But there's also a statement saying, we would be in the kingdom era 2 years from that date. If you could locate that statement saying, we would be in the kingdom era 2 years from that date. Now, look at, brothers and sisters, how God revealed this wonderful prophecy by parallelism. Let's go back again to the illustration. By such complete parallelism. First, the Babylonian captivity from 608 BC to 538 BC, 70 years. But they did not return to Jerusalem not until 536 BC. 2 years after the 70 years captivity ended. Now, it also typified with the Babylonian captivity, the modern Babylon, Dark Ages, 538, then 1798. 1,260 years. But they have not been able to return to the vineyard not until 1800 AD, 2 years. But how about, brothers and sisters, the prophecy in Zechariah 1 verse 12? And it was revealed unto us that symbolical number 70, which represent the 70 jubilees. Now, 70 jubilees, so let us multiply 70 times 50, 70 times 50, that should be 3,500 years. So I would like to place, brothers and sisters, here the 70 jubilees. 70 times 5 equals, times 50 equals 3,500 years. Now, so let us now subtract, brothers and sisters, from 1491 BC up to 2010 AD. That is already 3,500 years. 70 jubilees. So what does number 2 indicates here in this prophecy? There are still 2 sabbatical years. Every sabbatical years, that is 7. 7 times 2 equals 14. Therefore, 2010 plus 2 sabbatical years, which is 14, then you will fall on 2024 AD. Which complete parallelism with these 3. 70 years, 2 years. But this one is symbolical. 1,260 years, then 2 years. But in the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy, there must be 70 jubilees, which is 3,500 years. But the fact is, that 70 jubilees ended in 2010 AD. And it was overlapped because we are still out of the kingdom, which is exactly fixed to the 2 typical representation that after the 70th jubilee ended, there are still 2 sabbatical years that will pass. Then God's people will be delivered into God's kingdom. Now, let me show to you another illustration. Brothers and sisters, since we already established the absolute fact that the visible coming of Jesus Christ must be on the year of Jubilee. But what is Jubilee? From one biblical event to another. And as far as the Bible is thus concerned, there are only 2 biblical events that ever recorded in the Bible, and it's for prophecy, by which we can base that year of Jubilee recorded in 2 SR 252 as the visible coming of Jesus Christ. First, the year of ascension of Jesus Christ took place in 31 AD. 31 AD. And in that 31 AD, there are symbolical 40 days. That is on April 18 to May 27. Symbolical 40 days. And that 40 days is typifying the 40 jubilees from Christ's ascension. 40 jubilees, 40 times 50 equals 2,000. Therefore, the year of Jubilee, the 40th Jubilee must be 2031 from 31 AD. But since the shepherd's rod declared clearly, brethren, that the New Jerusalem is the antitypical ark, and Noah built the ark 120 years, and that 120 is symbolical with the 6,000 years, because 6,000 divided by 50 equals 120. Therefore, the end of 6,000 years must be the 120th Jubilee. So the number 120 in the days of Noah is pointing to the last and the final Jubilee. And according to this prophecy in the Great Controversy 327, from the very first lamp that was offered in 3969 BC to the death of Christ in 31 AD, there are 80 jubilees, which exactly typifying the age of Moses, when Moses offered the sacrificial lamb while in Egypt. Moses at that time was 80 years old. Then 80 plus 40 equals 120. Therefore, 2031 AD is the 120th Jubilee, as well as called the 40th Jubilee. And that is pattern number 4. The year 2031 AD. Now let us go back, brethren, to that subject. The sheep is offered on the second day of the feast. And that is April 16, according to the shepherd's rod. And since the Bible calendar, there are only 7 patterns. Therefore, to go back to the same pattern, there must be 7 years cycle. Now, let us go to timeanddate.com. April 16, 2022. April 16, Bible calendar. April 16, 2022, that is on the second day of the feast by which the wave sheep is offered. But in Gregorian calendar, that is October 4, 2020. This year, the predicted year by which exactly fits to 2 TG, that in that Passover feast, pattern number 2, the presidential election of the United States of America will take place this year, 2020. This is the prophetic year, brothers and sisters. And I'm so sure that there is no other year predicted in the prophecy except this year, because if you will add another 7 years to wait another pattern number 2, it would fall on April 16, 2029, by which in Gregorian calendar, that was August 29, 2027. Now, then I was saying, brothers and sisters, that the day of slaughter would be on April 14, 2031, pattern number 4. Then the prophecy will be spoiled. Because if that is the case, then we will be in the kingdom only less than 1 month. Now let us look at, brothers and sisters, April 14, 2031. You see, brothers and sisters, April 14, 2031, pattern number 4. That is the time that God's people will be delivered in the kingdom. Then, how about the statement Ezekiel 39? That God's people would be in the kingdom 7 years. Now, if that 7 years, brothers and sisters, are symbolical still, it cannot be applied. Because, look at, brothers and sisters, April 14, 2031, the deliverance. Then in April 17, 2031, the resurrection, the general resurrection will take place. And where is now the 7 last plagues? Brethren, I would like to show to you just a brief illustration, but we will take that subject on our next episode. Let me show to you the 740s. Number 7 indicates completeness. To repeat again, number 7 indicates completeness. And brethren, that is, if you think that that is just a mere happenstance, you will be among those people who will cry out bitterly with lamentation and mourn. God revealed unto us the 40 typical days so that each of us will understand that we are living in a period of time, brothers and sisters, by which all the prophecies recorded in the shepherd's rod will be fulfilled in quick succession. This is the type. April 18, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. May 27, the ascension. There are 13 remaining days in April 18. Therefore, 13 plus 27 equals 40. And this 40 typical days is from Bible calendar to Gregorian. Look at the sample that was given, October 22, 1844. The commencement of the cleansing of the sanctuary. Then that is the first 40. April 18, 31 AD. October 22, 1844. 18 plus 22 equals 40. You think that is just an accident? Here's another accident. Brothers and sisters. Pattern number 6. Bible calendar, April 1844. I think you need to place Bible calendar. April 1844. It was on April 18, the very first waving that performed in the most holy place But in Gregorian calendar, that is April 27. That is the second accident. Number 2, 13 plus 27 of April 1845. That is 40. Now let us go, brothers and sisters, to the last day of atonement. March 27, 2021. This March 27, 2021, next year, in Bible calendar, that is October 10, 2022. Pattern number 2. That is one of the evidence that it could not be on the what year is that? 2029? Brothers and sisters, that is pattern number 2, 2029. Let us look at, first, go back to timeanddeath.com. October 10, 2029. Pattern number 2. You see? That is February 19. Brothers and sisters. And you need 21 to make it 40. But the given numbers is only 18, 13, and 27. So there is no other year except this year. Pattern number 2. The next pattern number 2, it will no longer reveal the 40 typical days. Because there is no other year could do except this year. Pattern number 2. Now let us go back to our diagram. You see, brothers and sisters, March 27, that is October 10. That is another accident. That 13 plus 27 equals 40, March 27. Now here's another accident. April 14, 2023. The Shepherd's Rod says that the marking will be finished on the antitypical Passover. Now, 2023, April 14, that is pattern number 3. In Gregorian calendar, that is September 27, 2021. 13 plus 27 equals 40. I think that is in 2030. Will be repeated again. Pattern number 3. Let us look at April 14, 2030. You see, that is 21. In Gregorian calendar, you need 19 to make it 40. But there is 19 in April 31 AD. Only 18, 13, and 27. Now, let's go back to our diagram. How much more this incident in 2019? Look at, brothers and sisters. It will never happen again that in Bible calendar, April 2019, April 18, the same pattern of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. In Gregorian, it will fall in October 22, 2017. So, the two parties join in one day. April 18, 31 AD, October 22, 1844. So, October 22, but in Bible calendar, that is April 18. So, 22 plus 18 equals 40. Or 18 plus 22 equals 40. You think still an accident? Well, that accident is permitted by God. Because such accident happen only once in a lifetime. Now, let us go to November 27 on Bible calendar. This is the antitype of the 40 days from Christ's wilderness temptation in October 18, 27 AD, but in the antitype, it is October 18, 2022, up to November 27, 2022, by which in Gregorian, November 27, 2022 will fall on May 13, 2021. Then 27 plus 13 equals 40, the same day. So, parallel. The 40 days from Christ's resurrection to ascension, it was fulfilled the same day in 2019, which is 2017 in Gregorian. The 40 days from Christ's wilderness temptation to the time it was ended, the same day fulfilled in November 27, 2022 in Gregorian, that is May 13, 2021. 27 plus 13 equals 40. Then the last one, the seventh. Hey, the day of slaughter, September 22, 2022. 18 plus 22 equals 40. The day of slaughtering, according to three symbolic code number 8 to 10, in the old symbolic code, it will be like the day of slaughtering in the land of Egypt. That is pattern number 4. April 14, Thursday. But it is also perfectly matched to the seasonal calendar that September 22 is the date by which the summer is ended. Jeremiah 8:20. It will never be repeated again that September 22 in Gregorian calendar is April 14 on Bible calendar. It will take thousands of years, maybe 1,500 years, it will be repeated again to let us know that that is unmistakable fruit, impregnable evidence, unquestionable knowledge. Brothers and sisters, we are living in the time of the end. Whether you believe it or not, you might ridicule, laugh, whatever things that you will say unto us, but you cannot withhold the fulfillment of the prophecy. September 22, 2022, I guarantee to you 100%, that is the day of slaughter. We will continue this subject. May the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful, wonderful evening.